Hi, I'm Raymond. You're watching RPadTV, and this is going to be our first Fatal Four-Way episode. It's going to be me. Up there in the right is Carlos. On the left down is MacLean Marshall. And there's an empty chair who will be talking every now and then.
Which may be voiced by Paul.
Paul Thra. So Carlos is the co-host of Revisiting the Mania, an excellent retrospective podcast on WWE's WrestleMania. MacLean Marshall, who has been our guest before, is of course the wonderful person, Guy from Turtle Beach, as it says on his chyron there. And in that empty chair at some point will be Paul Semel, veteran video game journalist. And today we're going to be talking about Monarch, Legacy of Monsters, the latest MonsterVerse series featuring Godzilla on Apple TV Plus. As always, if you want to comment along, I'd love to hear questions from you guys. If you're enjoying the video, please give it a like, subscribe. All my socials are up there. First, how are you guys? Mac, Happy New Year. It's the first I've seen you this year. How are things?
Yes. Yeah, no, Happy New Year back to you as well. It's been busy, and I caught COVID early on, as we talked about just before this started, and was down for the count for a couple of weeks, but now I'm back, and this is actually like one of the first like fun things I get to do. So
hey,
sorry about that.
Yes, there is our fourth chair, Paul Semel from the excellent paulsemel.com. Since I'm talking to you, how are you, Paul? What's new?
I'm good. Just sort of a minor thing. My mom is in the hospital with a little bit of an issue, and for some reason she just told she had to talk to me about something really, really quickly, and so life gets in the way, as people say. Oh wait, no, that's life finds a way.
Both of those things are true. I
guess
think
both those things are true. So,
and Carlos, I was a guest on your podcast on Sunday.
Yeah.
Why don't you tell the people a little bit about what you do?
Well, primarily started revisiting or watching WrestleManias because my wife and I are gonna attend WrestleMania in Philadelphia later this year, and she had never watched any paid attention to anything. And since we're going, it's going to be like that whole weekend of, festivities and things like that. I'm like, I can't have you go to this and not know anyone while I'm geeking out. Like if Sting passes by or if Greg Valentine passes by, and I go, how about we rewatch WrestleManias for me, and you watch them for the first time. And we were watching WrestleMania 1, and she was making like little quirks and like little jokes and little observations, and I thought it was funny. And I'm like, would you want to record and put this out there? And she's like, sure, why not? And
how many WrestleManias have there been?
There's going to be the 40th edition of WrestleMania.
So you and your wife binge watched 40 WrestleManias?
We're working on it. Right now we just did 20 with Raymond, and the 21st one that we were gonna do, we'd have to push back because my wife worked late this week. So
got it.
We'll get that out probably on the 27th, but we're not gonna make it all the way to the 39th one before that, but we'll still keep going, and regardless of that.
Nice.
Before we kick things off on the Monarch chat, Larry says, Paul, sorry to hear about your mom.
Thank you, Larry.
And Mo says, hope your mama feels better soon.
Thank you, Mo. I will let her know that you said that.
Yes, please do. So, guys, let's do the quick review thing that we always do to kick things off. Let's go in the same order. Mac, quick thoughts on Monarch, Legacy of the Monsters?
All right. So the first thing, and I've been binge watching again because I kind of fell off of it, and then I've been binge watching to try and catch up. I only have like 2 more episodes to go, but so far the thing that caught me the most is why one of the first monsters was a mole. I thought that was not. It just wasn't what I was expecting. So it's not that it was bad. I just was like the only question I could keep thinking in my head is like, why a mole? Like, but besides that, like, I think seeing Godzilla, early on, and like I said, I haven't finished the season yet, but it just looks for me like what I want him to look like, and also what Paul's holding up in the in his window here. But it looks like what I was hoping for Godzilla, right? He looks and acts the way I wanted it to act.
I think Paul is having another Mitch McConnell moment. No, there he's back. Paul, give me your thread size review of Monarch.
I did not expect much from this. I actually thought I was not going to get it all, because my biggest complaint with monster movies, Godzilla or otherwise, is when they talk too much about the humans. But probably much I liked it. I thought it was slightly done. I thought it expanded upon the MonsterVerse, as they're calling it.
Yes.
It was like sort of like I was sort of expecting it to look cheap, because it's television. And even though we have things like the Marvel shows and the Star Wars shows that look really, really good and on par with their movies, I was still sort of concerned that, this is not going to look that good. I was expecting Sci-Fi Channel movie level special effects.
Dude, Apple has money. So
but a lot of people have money, and that doesn't mean their special effects budget is where it should be. And so I was pleasantly surprised by how the Godzilla in the show looked like the Godzilla in the movies, and there was no kind of they also didn't shy away. It also was like they were like, oh, look, here's the top of Godzilla's head, oh, there we go. Okay, that's not, you know what I mean? Because that's a trick they could have done, and they didn't. I mean, one of the shots is Godzilla basically is walks through the Golden Gate Bridge, and then he turns around it to yell at that lady for taking a photo of him. And he gets in close, and he's like, why don't you take a picture? It'll last longer. It's just he got so up close, and I was like, okay, that's impressive. That you guys actually spent some money on this.
So I think there's some context here. I believe this is your first experience with Apple TV Plus. Is that correct?
Yes, that was it. The first episode of the show was the first thing I'd ever watched on Apple TV Plus.
Right. So I think the rest of us have been watching for a while, so we kind of had a different expectation of their production levels, maybe.
Yeah, although I watched a bunch of other shows on there, and with the exception of Foundation, none of them ever really grabbed me.
I was just gonna say Foundation was the one that was in my head, bouncing around comparably.
Yeah, and that one had impressive special effects as well, but I still think my expectations would have been lower, because there's a big difference between having an elaborate set and having a giant lizard walking around.
Of course.
So
as some of you noticed, Paul is slowing down a bit there, and we have a comment that says Carlos is stealing Paul's bandwidth. Carlos, is this true, and why are you doing that? And what did you think of Monarch?
If I magically moved to California, maybe that'd probably be a possibility. But I thought this was a great show. The things that I like Paul and Mac had mentioned, is that they actually gave us moments with Godzilla. If it wasn't for the appearance at the desert, it was the Bikini Atoll things, and even though they used recycled footage from the 2017 movie, where Godzilla King of Monsters, it was still good and awesome to see him on the screen, even though it's depending on you're watching on your phone or you're watching on your TV, it's still pretty awesome to see him. And then I actually think that they did a great job with how this is just all one big cohesive story,
Right.
from point A to the end. It all makes sense. It all is weaved together perfectly. Now, there may be some issues with some of the characters, and we'll probably get into that a little bit later.
We shall.
I thought it's a great show.
So my perspective going into it was kind of like Paul's. I knew of it. I knew I was going to watch it because I'm just a Godzilla nerd, but I didn't really have high expectations for it until the opening credits when I saw Chris Black and Matt Fraction. A lot of people know Chris Black is the producer of Severance, which is I know you're a big fan of that show, Carlos.
Yeah.
And Matt Fraction has written some of my favorite comic books. He did great work with Iron Fist. He had a great Iron Man run. His Hawkeye series really redefined that character for me. So when I saw those two names as the producers of this show, I'm like, oh, wow, this could actually be interesting. And overall, I was very much entertained. Out of the so-called MonsterVerse, which is Legacy's brand for the Godzilla and King Kong films, Monarch was easily my favorite, like more so than any of the movies. Maybe the Gareth Edwards one is a little bit better than the others, but for the most part, American Godzilla disappoints me. And this Monarch did not. So I was very happy about that. I want to talk about the story, the overall story. Carlos mentioned this a bit and how it's one big cohesive thing. I want to know what aspects of the story worked for you. Paul, kick this one off.
For me, the big thing was, and this sort of ties into what Carlos said, is how they tied together the past and the relative present. You know, how they had these, you know, the two different versions of the same characters and showed what happened and how they related to them and whatnot. I thought it was really interesting. And I think, of course, like a lot of that rests on the shoulders of Kurt Russell and his son Wyatt, who are father and son and play the same character at two very different times in their lives. And I thought that was a really interesting way to kind of show these different aspects of what Monarch has been doing, what they are doing, what they're trying to do, and, you know, and also sort of the beginnings of Monarch.
Right. Carlos, what did you think of the story?
I thought it was very like methodically like thought out, like that from tying in the first Godzilla the film from Gareth Edwards to where it's currently presently going. We got like little Easter eggs about Apex,
Right.
Mechagodzilla, and then we got the Kong and Skull Island that comes into play, and then we got to see a little bit of the Axis Mundi, as it ends up being called by Keiko. But so it all kind of makes you think that this is maybe something that can actually be scientifically explained if we get like the budget, like, you know, Monarch and Apex has, and maybe we can find our own Hollow Earth someday.
I hope not. Mac, do you want to find Hollow Earth? And did you enjoy the story so far?
I mean, the first question, kinda, but mostly I think like it's gonna find us first, anyways.
Yeah, probably.
And then, you know, I just want to go back to what Paul was saying and kind of like layer onto that. I think one of the most motivating things for me in the story is, again, the young and old version of the same character. And I've been trying to think about this, but like, what other actors look so iconically like a younger version and older version of the same human, more so than you get with like, you know, Wyatt Russell and Kurt Russell. There's just that, like, again, like he's just got such that distinct like kind of facial structure and jawline that like it's unmistakable to go like, it really, like, there is no almost like jumping the shark, because it really could just be a younger version of him. And that really does deliver the story more for me than I think if it was potentially anybody else playing that duo. And I don't really know who other like father son actor, you know, or actresses or whatever could pull that off to that degree. I think it really works, and I think that's why I like the story. And then I also like a couple of the other just narratives that you're following along that I thought was really interesting, like the fact that Hiro has like a family in Japan and then a family in America, like just the merging of like essentially what I guess is more like real life kind of BS that most people, like, you know, have to deal with, is like it's also like right there in the middle of this giant, like, you know, shit show of monsters, like, you know, destroying, you know, every cities and what have you. So I think it's just a neat blending of that. There's a couple things where I think they focus too much on certain character development lines that I don't necessarily care about. We can get into that later, but
yeah,
overall, I think so far, like that's been like the thing about the story that just makes it so fun to watch. Is because I find myself going, when are they going to cut back to like a different scene showing younger, so and so, and then back to older so and so, and they just do enough of that shifting back and forth to make me like to it's like to keep me interested and wanting to just kind of tune into the next episode.
I love that point you made about Hiroshi. I never really thought about it before, because he's going around the world trying to solve this monster problem. And, while I'm at it, I might as well commit adultery.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, we can put a family, they won't ever find out about each other. And like, it's just like that. That's again, like when I said, I don't have maybe the context that you guys have with like being like hardcore historical Godzilla fans. I love a good sci-fi movie, but like, there's like I said, the element of coming to the series completely like without any background knowledge and just being like, oh, okay, well, this is neat.
Yeah, no, and I love that
a little bit more for everybody, I think, in that way.
Great.
Well, that's a reference actually to the original movie, in which you thought that Godzilla has two different families, one in Japan and one in Australia, and they find out about each other, and then they go out, and it's a whole thing. But
yeah,
does Mothra know about that?
Who do you think the mother is?
Out of the four of us, I would say Paul is probably the most knowledgeable about Godzilla, because he was there in with Raymond Burr in that movie. No, I have a question for you guys, going on some of Mac's points. What if the character of Lee Shaw was played by the other side of the family, and it was Goldie Hawn and Kate Hudson? Would that work?
I think only so. Again, for me, I think contextually, because I know they're related, I could make that connection in my head. Whereas if I just saw them without knowing, I feel like, I don't know, like they could be related, they could not be.
Right. That's actually a great audience question. Guys, if you have any ideas of who would play an old and young version of the same character, I was almost thinking Damon Wayans. Damon Wayans and Damon Wayans Jr. They look pretty different though, Tom and Colin Hanks. Like, he doesn't
have another one. What's the other one's name?
Well, Chet doesn't look anything like Tom Hanks though.
Well, and this is the funny thing is, I always see these things online where people are like if you see such and such a celebrity and their daughter, you can't tell them apart. And then you look at them and you're like, I can totally tell them apart. They don't really look that much alike,
Yeah.
There are some like Uma Thurman and her daughter are pretty similar.
But they usually look like okay, that's the mom, that's the daughter. They don't look like they're twins. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Here's a good one. Johan says Ice Cube and his son.
That's a good
one.
That's actually pretty perfect.
I'd watch that movie also, by the way.
Yeah. Can see him like pointing a gun sideways at Godzilla. Johan also adds, I hadn't watched any of the Godzilla films before watching Monarch. The show got me to at least start the films. I think you'll be disappointed ultimately. I don't think anything is as good as Monarch out of the MonsterVerse. The Baldwins, they all look like each other. I'm sure there's some Baldwin son or grandson out there that looks like one of the other ones.
Alec has like 9 kids at this point, so
that is true.
One of them's gonna pan out.
Yeah, odds are that one of them's gonna kind of have that look.
Let's jump to the next point, which is talking about the time jumps. Now, you guys mentioned that part of the story takes place in, I think it's like 1957 or ends in
1952.
You're right. And she falls down the hole in 1957, and the other part's in 2015. So there's, especially in the first 3 episodes, there's a lot of jumping between those 2 time periods before it kind of settles on focusing on one on this episode and the other. Did the time jumps work for you? Did it confuse you? At first, for me, I was like, it was kind of hard to follow until I got a better understanding of what was going on in each timeline. And then maybe around episode 3, it was totally worked for me. Mac, what do you think?
Yeah, I think same thing. At first, you're like, oh, wait, what time? What are we again? And then once you kind of just figure out how they're kind of flowing back and forth between, you know, the 50s and you know, 2015 or whatever the case is. Once you kind of jump, like make that jump, it's not too hard to like follow along. And then again, I think like you said, like, you know, they do enough hooking in each era to kind of make you want, like, the moment they shift from the 1950s to, you know, current, you know, in 2015, the 2015 stuff is interesting in its own right. But then you do find yourself, or at least for me, I do want to get back to what happens next in the prior era, and vice versa too, right? Because like they're telling each chunk of stories in such a good way in each timeline that like they're just spending enough time in each to kind of sate my like thirst for finding out what happens next.
Right. Carlos, what did you think of the time jumps?
I think if I didn't see the recent season of Loki, and they do a lot of time jumping here and there, it probably would have been like something like you guys experienced, where it took a while to adjust for you to get like, okay, this is where we are, this is how the pacing goes, and now I got it. Like, I didn't mind it at all. I thought that both of the stories that were gonna intertwine eventually, and we eventually get that, I think, until like episode 9, episode 10, which brings my point that they had thoughtfully plotted this beginning and end, and they weaved it perfectly. And that, like,
so it's not like Lost.
Definitely not like Lost.
Yeah, they had someone
do the next episode. I don't know.
Unlike J.J. Abrams, they knew how to stick the landing here.
Yeah.
Now, Paul, you're kind of like the Kang of the Mid-Wilshire neighborhood. As a master of time, what did you think of the time jumps here?
I tend to think of myself as being more of a Kodos, but okay. I was not confused by it, but I also knew what was going to happen going in. Like, I had seen interviews and articles about it, and they were in which they talked about it. So I was like, oh, okay. When are we going to switch time? Oh, now we are. Okay, here we go. I did think that it was interesting that within the individual times they switched times, and I can see how, especially if you didn't know that this is what they were going to do, that could be confusing. So that aspect, I was like, wait, hang on, what are they? Oh, okay, no, right. Like, for example, like they show, Keiko, getting eaten by all the bugs, and I'm like, oh, and then they go back and they're like, there's Keiko again. I'm like, okay, right, okay, yeah. Right. So there was a little bit of that every once in a while, but usually it was more when they were jumping through the 50s, or the 2000s as opposed to 2000 to 50.
Let's sneak back into the comments section for a bit. Johan says, I only like the first movie, but haven't watched the most recent in theaters. Nor should you have. No. And adds, I'm not going to touch this comment, man. One of the Baldwins is a killer. That may be literally true. Yeah, I'm not touching that one. Larry adds, speaking of time jumps, next up, The Witcher season 1. There is a new Witcher season coming soon, and
with a different Witcher, right?
Different Witcher, because Superman is gone, and they added Morpheus to the cast recently. I thought I read that a few days ago.
Yeah.
Mo adds, the problem with time jumping is often lies in the potential disruption of the timeline and the butterfly. Okay, we're getting metaphysical here. Or is it the spaghetti theory, like Batman Michael Keaton said, or is it the splitting? I don't know how it works. All I know is the Avengers taught us that Back to the Future is just a bunch of bullshit.
It's true.
Now let's move on to the actors. Paul, who were the standout performances in this series for you?
Well, as I mentioned, both versions of Shaw, Kurt Russell and Wyatt Russell, I thought were really, really good. I also liked the ladies. I thought all three of them, especially Anna, Mari, and Kiersey, were all really, really good in their own way. But Keiko was easily my favorite. Like, in fact, I was like super bummed after that first episode when I was like, oh God, she's dead. Like, oh man, she was it was that kind of like a Boba Fett moment where you're like, oh, man, like, why did you kill them off?
To start off the series, by the way, to hook you with that, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
it's
it
almost
was
like a Ned Stark kind of thing.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
was
exactly.
it was kind of like, except that like Ned Stark at least made it to like the 5th or 6th episode or whatever.
Right.
Right.
And I knew that was also coming because I had read the book. Whereas this, I was like, oh man, they killed the cool lady. And then like the next week she was back, and I'm like, okay, I feel better about this.
Carlos, which performances stood out for you?
Yeah, I'm with the same with Paul. I agree. Impressed with the performances, especially with Wyatt and Kirk. I know they're father and son, but it's still, having to get into the same mindset of what their character is going to be acting. And it kind of helps that you're dad, so you could be like, oh, okay, I can just do this and talk to him a little bit more. But also, like Paul, the performance by Mari Yamamoto, who played Keiko, Kate Anna Sawai, that she did, like, the whole arc of her character was pretty cool. She goes from being this broken and traumatized person and like going through PTSD of G-Day, and then you find out that your dad has a completely different family on the other side of the world in Japan, and she ends up like able to recover and accepting that her dad isn't perfect, and he wasn't perfect because he didn't have an actual family, because his mom falls in that hole. His adopted father ends up trying to improve his theories about wormholes and rifts, and his adopted uncle ends up being lost for 22 years. So I thought that was pretty cool. And
How about for you, Mac? Any performances stand out?
I'm gonna pick two different ones. One, the girl who plays Duvall, the kind
Yeah.
of street
Yeah.
chief. I think it's just cool to see a girl in that lead role, because that's typically, like, a lot of times it's always like a guy, and I think she just does like a really good job of being like intense and also seemingly willing to kind of do the job of whatever it takes. So I think she's pulling that off really well. And the other one that I just laugh at every time she's on screen is the lady who plays Natalia Verdugo.
Yeah.
Mostly because I don't know if you guys recall this, but way back when I worked at Activision, she reminds me of my boss at Activision, Marianne, from like ages ago. She just has like the really deep black hair and like the very Murphy Brown, no BS attitude. It's like every time we see her on screen, I was like, okay, I'm at Activision again, but that's not. So it's just, but yeah, she just reminds me of that time, and I think she's doing that role really well too. Because like I said, I'm 2 episodes out of finishing the season, so I don't know what happens with her or anything else beyond that. But so far, again, in addition to everybody else we've talked about, right? I think those two are also kind of pulling their weight.
She sleeps with Godzilla.
Damn it!
Ruined it for you. So Larry's favorite character was Godzilla. The way he came out of the mountain showed some really good acting range.
Yeah, I mean, who else can do it that well? Really, I mean,
yeah, perfect casting for Godzilla. Revolver Master said Joe Tim was really great. Yes, completely agree. I like the Tim character a lot. I'm only familiar with that actor from The Morning Show, also on Apple TV Plus, and I liked his vibe with Duvall a lot. More on that a bit later, but for the most part, I like the adults much better than the kids.
Yeah.
So yeah, all the adults were fully interesting, fleshed out characters. Obviously, Kurt Russell is a legend to us. I mean, that guy, what a career he's had,
right.
And especially for us with movies like Big Trouble in Little China, the comedy classic Overboard. So
The Thing.
The Thing.
Escape from New York.
Yeah, I mean he's just awesome, and it's cool watching. I like watching older actors that have accomplished a lot and are still acting in their 60s and 70s. Like I watch him and Harrison Ford, and it looks like they're having so much fun.
Yeah,
acting, and it's contagious. I enjoy the vibe from them.
Especially what's the Shrinking?
Oh yeah.
So good.
Yeah, that's a really underrated, overlooked series. Highly recommended. Watch Shrinking. Paul, you should watch Shrinking now that you have Apple TV Plus.
one thing I did want to bring up about the two Russells is, to his credit, Wyatt didn't do an imitation of his dad.
Right.
No, yeah.
And that's something I could see some like a lesser actor kind of doing, like, okay, now I got to act like my dad. And he really didn't. I mean, like he obviously knows his dad better than anybody, except for maybe his mom. But it's not like he was doing like a Saturday Night Live impression of him.
Right.
I mean, granted, it's Kurt Russell. He's not like, Christopher Walken, where everybody like does a Christopher Walken and it's terrible, but still he could have very easily fallen into that trap and he didn't. And I deserve credit for that.
So Revolver Master says, you're trying to say Will and Jaden Smith.
Ooh.
Yeah, although I think one of them did not get the charisma gene. So
yeah, one of them's a little low energy.
Yeah. Now let's go a little negative here and talk about the characters you didn't like. Like for me, I did not like Hiroshi's kids. I thought for maybe 60-70% of the series, I thought they were annoying as fuck. And I'm like, God, it's like, no wonder your dad abandoned you. You both suck. Like horrible thought.
This or giant monsters, and I gotta be honest, giant monsters win every time.
Like I thought he was just a whiny bitch artist.
Yeah.
And she's a teacher that couldn't be faithful to her partners. And I'm like, you're both of you are horrible. You're both terrible people. I hope Godzilla eats you. So that those were my thoughts on the kids. I mean, it's not a criticism of the actors. I think they both did a fine job in their roles. I just didn't find either of the Randa kids likable. How about you, Mac?
You know what? Like to the same extent, I don't disagree with you on the kids. I think when you look at like some of the actors that we talked about seem like irreplaceable. And I think like the kids are like those could have been replaced with somebody else and maybe done a better job, maybe not. I don't know. And I feel like Anders Holm, who I love in pretty much all of his other stupid things that he's in, like I just don't know what it is. I don't know if it's like my inability to like disconnect from him from like Workaholics or anything like that. But he just seems like not the right fit for that character to me, and I can't put my finger on it and place why. And he does a decent job. But there's just like a level, like a layer on top of that to me. Or I just like even my wife walks by and she's like, "That's the dude from this or that." And like, yeah, but it's like it's like seeing any of those guys be like in a serious role. You just kind of be like, well, you guys do the funny, right? Like, so it's hard to like jump the shark for me with him in that role.
I love that you use the word replaceable to describe the kids. That's the perfect way to describe it to me anyway. Paul, how about you? Any acting performances that you weren't happy with?
Not particularly, especially over the whole arc of the show. I do agree with Mac about like that one guy where I was like, oh, that's that weird funny guy from something. And then he wasn't like weird or funny. And I'm like,
you don't know what to do. You're like, I don't know how to process this.
Okay. What was he in Workaholics? Is he one of the I mean, I know he wasn't the kid with the bad hair and the mustache.
No, that's Blake. And then he's Durs. He's the
so he was one of the three of them.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I wondered whatever happened to the other two, because like the one guy,
Adam Devine is super popular, funny comedian. Like, but again, it'd be like the same thing with him taking that role. You're so used to, or Blake, right? You're so used to seeing any one of the three of the guys from Workaholics could probably take the role that Anders Holm was, or what's his name, is playing in the Godzilla show, because to me it'd be the same effect. Like I'm so used to like laughing at them, and being funny that like I don't know how serious I could take them in this role, but he's doing a good job, I guess. But it's just there's a weird disconnect for me.
On a side note, I think Blake does a lot of stand-up these days.
He does, yeah.
Okay, so I think I saw his name on a Comedy Store marquee or something, or an improv marquee. Now let us finish blasting the actors with Carlos. Was there anyone you weren't happy with?
Besides like the acting, like I couldn't like not to shit more on Anders, but you go from him being in that, how he looks, Anders, and then like 10 to 12 years later, he's supposed to be John Goodman on Skull Island.
Right.
So that
I see that I didn't even put together it's the same dude. So now
it's
it's
like
making more
that
sense.
didn't make sense. That's one thing that I feel like they kind of like dropped the ball on that. Like just like Star Wars and the whole Obi-Wan, like how does he go from Ewan McGregor to being Alec Guinness?
Right.
So that one, and I feel like they kind of like also dropped the ball, and it's nothing on Kiersey, but like the character of May felt like it probably should have been more, but it feels like once they made that connection with Monarch to Apex, they're like, okay, you're done. That's it.
Right.
I will say, beyond the actors specifically, there is one scene that I did audibly laugh out loud at recently, which was when they tried to nuke Godzilla. And it's not that the fact that they did that, like, but the fact that there was like a scene of like all these military dudes just on the beach, like just hanging out on like lawn chairs.
Yeah.
They all put their goggles on for the explosion, and it's just like all of a sudden there was like a breeze really quick, and that's it. It was like, that didn't give me like the feeling of a true power of it. I don't care how far away they were. They should have made that. You always see like the hiding behind, they're behind like some kind of a brick wall or something like that, to make it feel like, oh man, these guys, like, this is just like there. You guys want to go on the beach and watch the nuke go off? Like that just was like so casual.
Right. They might as well have Mai Tais or something.
Like 100%. Like there should have been like a drink person walking around, like a DJ in the corner. I was just like, what's happening right here? And then it was like boom, and a little gust of wind, and like, oh, he's dead. We don't even send helicopters to check. It's fine, right? Like it just was like, all right, we're good.
We have another comment from Revolver Master who says I didn't like Hiroshi and May. Hiroshi was just a crappy person. Well, he had a crappy childhood. It wasn't normal. And May was just too edgelord with a filler backstory. Yeah, I think that kind of was going on what Carlos says is as soon as she served her purpose, it was like, okay, that's enough, May. So maybe it was hard juggling all those characters.
May was the one, so I mentioned earlier, like a couple like just kind of separate character storylines that fit but didn't fit. It just a little bit forced, but like if it wasn't there, I wouldn't have minded.
Yeah. Now, in the overarching sense, did anything in Monarch Legacy of the Monsters change the MonsterVerse for you? I mean, for me, I said it in the intro, this is the most interesting the MonsterVerse has ever been to me. So I was not impressed with the Godzilla X Kong trailer, but now I'm kind of curious to see what happens after the events of this series. So yeah, it did make things more interesting for me. How about for you, Carlos?
It makes me want to see if they do decide to go with a season 2, if it's going to be more of Bill Randa and more exploration of Skull Island, because there's so much that we don't know about that particular
time
piece.
period.
Yeah, right. It's like there's it's just like me thinking about it. I'm like, Skull Island went all these years and Kong was always there, but Godzilla couldn't never sense him because they're supposed to be both alphas. So Godzilla was never able to sense that Kong was around because of a storm. Like logically, that doesn't make sense to me. So I just need someone to write out a story because I can't think of one.
Well, that would be interesting because this really is 3 generations of a family, and we don't know much about the middle one, or we know the least about the middle generation of what happens to adult Billy Randa and how Hiroshi ended up the way he did.
That's another thing I was going to bring up. How old is Hiroshi? Because when Shaw goes in, it's like 1962 or 63 when he goes into the rift.
Right.
And then he meets him. How old was Hiroshi when he went in there? He looks like he could have been like maybe 8 or 9.
Right. So, and then when he sees him again, he looks like he's in his de-aged Hiroshi was like what, late 20s, early 30s, something like that.
So then we fast forward another 30 years, so he's like maybe in his mid 50s, late 50s. So
Yeah.
I want to see if maybe he actually made it through one of those rifts, and that's why he's like hell bent on like trying to summon Godzilla, or maybe wants to go back in there and manage to get out somehow.
Paul, you might be the only one of us that has seen all the legendary MonsterVerse movies. I know I haven't. I don't give a shit about King Kong. But did this change anything for you for the MonsterVerse?
What I have trouble sort of figuring out, and I figure they're going to explain this at some point, is okay, so you have this alternate dimension, but in King Kong versus Godzilla, you have the Hollow Earth with the underside down, the upside down worldish thing. Like, why? I don't understand why they had to do both.
I thought you were going to say the undercarriage.
The undercarriage world, yeah. But like, I'm not really sure, like, what, because the whole thing in the movies was, how does Godzilla get around like from here to here so quickly? Like, and they were like, oh, it's the Hollow Earth, and there's like all these tubes, and he basically like, it's like there's a Godzilla subway system basically, and like, and then with this, they're like, oh, there's like this alternate dimension, and it's like, how do those two things coexist? I mean, I'm not arguing that they can't. I just don't know why they did that and how those two things coexist, and like if you go in the wrong hole, do you end up in the alternate verse, or and then like, I don't know. It's all very weird and confusing.
Well, didn't they explain it as the Axis Mundi was it's kind of like between the worlds, so it's not. It has aspects of Hollow Earth and real, or I guess
right. But I just don't know how those two things connected, and also just from a pure story point telling perspective, like, why do both? Like, what does
it's the world between worlds that they clearly established in Ahsoka, right?
Yes. Yeah. So when they started calling it the Axis Mundi, I kept calling it the key Addy Mundi. He's that long-headed Jedi.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think they explain it in the second to last episode on or no, it's the last episode. Yeah, you're right. On how it links to everything. So like Mac was saying, it is kind of like their world between worlds from Star Wars there. And
I haven't even seen the last two episodes, so I'm just glad I'm spot on without even seeing things.
Well, yes, that shows your advanced knowledge and theory making. So, Mac, you probably had the least interest of the MonsterVerse out of us. Did this change anything for you? Are you more interested?
I think what it does for me is it does make me more interested to kind of check out some of the more recent stuff. I mean, like I'm not gonna go back and watch like some, like I mentioned earlier, like does that include the Matthew Broderick? Like, right. My knowledge base is not as robust in this sense, but I think like it does certainly make me go, if I think like Carlos was saying, if they do a season 2, I'm definitely in. Like I'm going to want to watch and see what happens next in another season. Whether that season is a connected storyline that takes over from season 1, whether that's a completely separate storyline that happens in parallel or with some overlap, or later on, like with different casts, like almost like a True Detective kind of thing, right? Like that could be an interesting take too, or again, different monsters from the like if they did something with King Kong and didn't do, again, I think for me, what was cool here was just, it wasn't the same old Godzilla story, right?
Yeah.
It's totally different. And I think if they could take the same approach with the King Kong or a Mothra or any other kind of like key players within the MonsterVerse, something like that, like, then yeah, like I'd be super interested to see what they do with those as kind of like a newer and emerging kind of fan of all this stuff.
I like it. Now, Mac, I'm going to apologize in advance. We're going to get into some spoilerish territory.
Oh, yeah, I anticipate this is on me. I did not do all of my homework. I did just enough to get by, unfortunately.
So these questions are for Carlos, Paul, and for everyone watching. Is Lee Shaw dead? Do you think he's dead? And like my theory on this was, I'm like, yeah, he's dead. Kurt Russell doesn't have time for this shit. But then Yeah, exactly. He's getting too old for this shit. But then that character's too good that you almost kind of have to bring him back. I don't know. What do you guys think? Paul, you go for this one.
I think that I don't know, because I've seen interviews with Kurt Russell talking about the show, always with Wyatt, by the way, which seemed to be fun for him. And it seemed like he had a lot of fun making this show. I think if his character comes back, it's because he wants to come back and he has the time to come back. I think that's why they left it somewhat ambiguous. Like, there's no shot of him like falling and getting cut in half and ripped apart and blown up. You know what I mean? Like, could he be alive? I mean, that's why you're asking the question, because he could be alive.
Right.
He could not be alive.
And by the way, getting cut in half doesn't mean anything. Look at Darth Maul. That guy lived.
True.
Force Ghost maybe later. Who knows?
Yeah.
Right.
Carlos, do you think Lee Shaw is done?
I think he is done. Just because it's, Kurt Russell, depending on how fast they can turn around the season 2, he may not be wanting to do it. I mean, he is getting up there in age, unless they do some more limited work.
Right.
Maybe present day Lee Shaw is dead, but doesn't mean that he can't come back season 2, like in some flashback scenes.
I was gonna say
He comes back like in 1982. So now I know he goes into that retirement home, but he's still got to teach Hiroshi some things. He couldn't just pick up everything from watching his adoptive father's files or films or things that he had lying around before he abandoned them for Skull Island.
By the way, I did not recognize John Goodman in the first episode. I didn't realize it was him until I looked it up in IMDb after.
Yeah.
I was like, that looks like John Goodman, but not fat. And I guess he just got old and thin. Larry brought up a point that's similar to yours. He says, I think they left it open knowing that he's older and may not be available for another season. This way they're safe, whatever happens. Yeah, that is good studio planning. Revolver Master adds, so far, only Gareth Edwards' Godzilla movie canon is right. Because in Kong Skull Island, Bill Randa got eaten. Oh, did he?
Yeah,
he did. I know that. Because I don't watch those King Kong movies due to a lack of interest. Unless we just imagine he ran off to the beach and then ran back to the skull crawlers.
No, Bill Randa is definitely dead. He died in that movie, but
was it John Goodman in that movie?
It was John Goodman in
that movie.
Oh. Okay, that makes sense now.
That's why I was saying that we should probably get like a season 2 of Bill Randa in the Kong Skull Island is trying to get back over there to Skull Island, I believe, in the movie. So he obviously found something and he wanted to go back. So that's probably how he got away from that first monster. Was it the spider or the crab?
Oh yeah, he's fighting the crabs.
The spider and the crab.
Yeah, so
both,
then he
both
throws away
outside
his
and
stone.
inside.
Yeah.
He's fighting the crab. Sorry. But to answer your question, Revolver Master, I think they're all canon, and unless I'm mistaken.
Yes.
No, they're
all
all canon.
The four movies are those 4 movies are canon.
So
and I think the animated
not Matthew Broderick.
What 4 movies do I need to watch at this point?
It's the most recent Godzilla King of Monsters, Kong Skull Island, and King Kong versus Godzilla, the new one, not the old one. I think the very first Godzilla is also canon. I think they basically make reference to that having. Wait, did they? No,
they referenced the 98 one.
I'm talking about the one from the 1950s.
Oh,
but I don't think it. No, actually, now that I say that out loud, I don't think that is canon, because when Godzilla shows up, nobody knows who he is.
Right.
And if a giant monster had crushed Tokyo, I think we would have known.
Yeah.
I noticed Paul had his Apple reactions on. Do your thumbs up again, Paul? There it is.
Oh,
What
I'm
the
gonna
hell
try
is that?
How does that
It's
work?
an Apple
from a
thing.
Mac. Yeah.
What else do we have? Does this work? Like,
Oh,
that's staying on forever.
What if
Yeah.
you give somebody the finger? Just curious.
Oh,
Anything?
no.
Class,
Nope.
anyone?
How about
Wait, they don't have anything for the devil horns? Come
how
on.
about
you gotta try.
Shaka? Will Shaka work? No,
No, that's not the shocker. That's the
not the
That's
shocker.
Shaka, not
Shaka.
oh.
Like, God
Like,
damn
the
you,
shocker is different. That's
you
we're
perverted
not going into that.
deviant.
Whoa.
The Shocker. He was one of my favorite Spider-Man villains. No.
Oh wait, he gets you balloons. Okay,
That
very weird.
reminds me of a story there. In college, there was this girl, Barbara, and I randomly started a rumor that, yeah, Barbara's totally into the Shocker, and it just spread.
Oh,
and for her
God.
birthday, I got her a Spider-Man comic with the Shocker on the cover of it.
Oh, that shocker. Oh.
Yeah, I thought you were
yeah.
talking about the rapper Silk the Shocker.
No, I thought he was talking about
I was with Paul.
the finger.
I immediately thought the worst possible thing you could think, and then I'm pleasantly surprised that you went the other way.
Yeah.
Is that on Paul's dating profiles? Likes the Shocker.
Wow.
What's that dating service? It's like for like LA rich people and socialites. It's like a pretty exclusive dating app.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. I don't know the name of it though, but yeah.
Paul's on that, girls. So
Yeah.
He can't tell you what the name is, so you can't find him.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's how life works.
So next spoilerish question. Do you think Tim and Duvall had a thing? In my head, they're totally sleeping together.
By the way, I'm just gonna throw my vote in. I think Shaw's alive. I still don't know. I have no
Okay.
idea.
Well, you didn't know he was dead, so
Exactly. No, he's dead, so I think he's still alive.
So Mac, you were into the Duvall character. Would she sleep with Tim? Do you think they were sleeping together in the series?
There was a little bit of
There's a vibe.
there's some kind of connection there, and but like I feel like it would be too silly for the rest of the show or the series if that was a thing. But so I'm gonna go with no, but there's certainly a mutual something between them, like his respect for her badassery and her respect for his. I don't know if you want to call it like affable, nerdy, like he's just a likable, nerdy guy. I don't know.
They, as Paula Abdul taught us, opposites attract.
She's
Way to-
impressed by his
quote
big
Paul
brain.
Abdul.
Paul, do you
I'll
think
bet nobody would have put money on a Paula Abdul reference coming up in a Godzilla podcast?
we got to teach the kids about MC Scat Cat? Otherwise, he will be forgotten in history. Paul, do you think Tim and Duvall were a thing?
No.
No. You guys disappoint me.
I understand what you guys are saying. I don't see how timing wise, like, I don't think they ever got to the point where she would have been like, okay, your goofy charm has won over. I'll fuck you.
That's not how it worked. She'd be the pants in that relationship. She would just take Tim.
Yeah, but that's my point. Is like there was never a point where she was like, all right, we're gonna go bang the closet.
They traveled the world together in this series. There was downtime for sure.
Yeah, I just don't see it.
In Carlos,
I'm gonna go with, as far as this series, no. But if we were to push this in real life, then yes, they probably would have been able to find ways to do it in the closet, do it in Tim's office that has no windows.
That's
how does he have an office with no windows?
Was Duvall in the helicopter with Tim when the helicopter went down?
No.
I know they found, Tim comes out, he emerges from the sand, but for some reason I thought she was in the helicopter with them when the helicopter
She
crashed.
was with Shaw, I thought, on the ground. I could be remembering wrong though.
Because if they were in the helicopter together, they could have survived I'm making shit up here at this point, but they could have had like a shared near-death experience, and that would be like the context.
Bone because you're still alive. Thank God you're alive, sex.
Yes, or it reminds me of that line in Spies.
But if she just watched that shit spin from the ground and then crash, and he's like, "Well, he's fucking dead," and then she just went off and did something, then I'm gonna go with no.
Larry adds likable nerdy. So Paul, yes, Paul, you are now Tim. So
Damn it!
All of us.
Once I'd like to have it.
All of us are some degree of Tim.
we are all Tim. Tim is us. So,
It'd be a good T-shirt. We are Tim.
Yeah.
Mac, I'm going to apologize again. I'm going to get into spoiler territory. I want to talk about the finale. It just seemed like those 2 days for Keiko, that was a lot for her emotionally. And it just seemed for me, it happened so fast. I'm like, hey, I'm alive. It's like decades later, even though I think it's 57 days. Oh, there's my granddaughter. Oh, there's my son who is now older than me. And like, but she seemed to, I mean, they gave her a few minutes to deal with the trauma and the shock of all that, but that just seems like too much for one person to bear over the course of 2 days. Did any of you get that sense? Carlos?
Yeah, I did get that sense. And like you mentioned, they did give her like a whole, hey, hold your breath. I'm Lee, but I'm super old from the last time you saw me. And you can't see me right now because you might be in some shock. But I think they all acted that particular scene pretty good. You know,
She acted the hell out of that scene. Yeah.
especially her. And then she kind of connects the dots about Kate. And
Right.
then,
No, she knows.
Yeah.
He wants Kate to say it.
her
Yeah.
to like prove her hypothesis that she's got going. She looks kind of like me, and it's 50 years. So yeah,
Right.
I think they did a great job on that.
Paul, was that a long 2 days for Keiko?
I can't even imagine going through that and and coming out the other side. Like, you don't come out the other side of that and are like, all right.
Right, but it seemed like here's 3 minutes to deal with this. Let's keep adventuring.
Yeah, but I think that's more a function of how much time they had before they had to leave and the storytelling. Like,
okay,
she's also, Keiko is a very smart person. I think that she kind of like, I can't deal with this. We got to get out of here. Like, if she had because that's the thing, if she went and had an emotional breakdown, which nobody would have faulted her for,
Right.
they would have been stuck there. They were on the clock.
that's true.
Like, if they were like, okay, look, we can't leave for a week, she would have been like off, like crying the whole time. But
Right.
and in fact, it's to the writer's credit that they showed her having these issues, having it hit her so hard. Because there's a lot of writers who wouldn't have done that. There's a lot of writers who would have been like, okay, here's the thing. You've been down here for all these years. Like, that's your granddaughter. Your kid's grown up. Your husband's dead. I'm your old friend, but I'm old. We got to go.
Right.
They would have cut the emotional stuff. And I'm glad that they didn't, because there needed to be something for that to become a realistic scene.
No, because that's heavy as hell.
Yeah.
But I also like how it helped explained. They kind of explained it in the previous episode of why Kurt Russell is not 150 years old in actuality. But one day in the Kiadi Mundi is 1 year in the proper Earth, sort of, kind of.
How do you tell when it's a day?
The sun or whatever is the sun for there.
I never saw it getting like dark because it's always like either in that blue or orange tint or the purple lightning strike. So I was
Like,
wondering
you
how.
never see, like, the janitors walking around the Death Star either, though, right?
That's true.
You have to watch the Death Star Cantina bit that Eddie Izzard does. It is fantastic and explains a lot.
Well, you also don't know how long a day in that realm. It could be 100 hours for all we know.
Right.
So, or 500 hours.
It's
like,
one.
Or it could be
it's
like
one Earth year. So
yeah, you don't know, right? I mean, but I'm thinking, like, if there is a sun there, you don't know how long it takes. It could be like it could be like an Alaska situation or something, like where they don't. There's places on the Earth where, like, they don't see the sun like months at a time. Like,
well, the obvious answer is that we have to rewrite the lyrics to "A Day in the Life" by the Beatles to explain all this stuff. We have a few comments from Larry, who says Tim's office is down in the basement, so it had no windows. It actually did make me think of Office Space with what was the character's name? Milton. Who was
Yeah.
Oh
in the
no,
basement.
Yeah,
was it Milton?
Yeah, it was Milton.
Oh yeah,
It was
yeah.
Miller.
he took my stapler.
From Beavis and Butthead originally.
Ah,
Oh,
He's in there's an old Beavis and Butthead, and he's a character in that.
Speaking of
wow.
Office Space, and not to derail, but we should do Louder Milk as well, because that stars Ron Livingston, who was also in Office Space, and it's one of the funniest shows I've been watching recently.
I first saw Ron Livingston in Swingers. I think was the first thing I saw him in.
Oh wow, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'll say this though, just based on what you guys are all talking about, and having not seen the final 2 episodes,
I feel bad.
I'm absolutely like more confused than I should be, but it's making me like, I'm like, once we're done, I'm gonna like go try and power through the rest of the series, because now I'm like more curious to find out how it all goes down.
And to that point, Larry adds, she had to be in shock. It would all hit her later. Yeah. That
Yeah.
probably was too much to process all of that at once. So that is a very excellent point, Larry. But overall, I do want to say that that's one of the best finales that I can remember in a while. They hit all the right points, tied things up nicely, and they gave a little teaser of, I don't know, it was kind of like a teaser of what happens next for that particular location. See, now I'm trying not to ruin it too much.
No, you like ruin it. I don't care.
So they end up on Skull Island 2 years later. And they are now funded by Apex. So that was the whole point of
Spoiler alert. Like,
So-
I didn't know who was funding it. This would be a mystery, but now,
Right. Well, it's Elon. Elon's funding it now. He's in charge of the whole shebang. But as a finale, did it wrap things up nicely for you, Carlos?
yeah. Besides the whole thing at the end, Skull Island and everything, like the thing I brought up about
Right.
Godzilla never noticing that Kong was there the whole time. Like, that's the only questions that I had coming out of that, besides how do we know that they spent 2 days, because we never saw a sunrise, sunset, and the Mondiacs, so
Well, no, that's why I was thinking, because they were equating both Keiko and Lee's time down there to approximately 1 day down there is a year on Earth, which is why when they came back to Skull Island 2 years later, that's why I was thinking it was 2 days for them to get to whatever portal.
Yeah, but that doesn't explain how Keiko was able to.
Well, that's a whole other adventure. How she survived for that long.
Maybe she'll give us the math now.
Maybe that's
the
season
second
2.
season.
Keiko versus the bug monsters. Like How I Met Your Bug Monster. Paul, did you like the finale? Did it work for you?
Yeah. The only thing that I didn't like, and this has an asterisk next to it, and sorry, Mac, is the scene where it's revealed that Keiko is still alive. Because that was just done in the most cliche, obvious, seen it so many times before way. Like, being chased by a monster, and then an arrow shows up and it stops the monster. And then they show you Keiko, and she's in this badass Wonder Woman Lara Croft pose, like, I'm alive and I've been surviving down here and I'm a badass. And if I didn't like this so much, and if I didn't like the show so much at that point, I would have been like, ugh.
It's kind of like the Nicole Kidman Aquaman, like.
It's like that. It's like when Lawrence Fishburne showed up in the Predator movie. Like I at one point I literally thought of like 8 different times that we've seen that where it's literally the same thing. Like somebody goes through a portal, they end up in another world or whatever, and they're rescued by somebody we all thought was dead, and they always have to strike this warrior pose, and they always have a bow and arrow.
I agree that physically it was like that, but I think the implication of Kate being saved by her grandmother, who's now the same age as her, that's what made it interesting for me. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, but like I really liked Keiko so much as a character and as a person that like even though that was a cliche moment and all that, I was like,
yeah, so it worked.
Yeah, I wish you'd kind of come up with something different, but like, you know.
We got another comment from Larry here who says it was a good season ender. Don't tell Mac about how they killed Tim.
God damn
They
it.
gave him COVID.
Well, no,
Right.
Duvall like boned him to death
Oh,
in his basement office.
death by snoo.
That's yeah. That's in the special feature. Now let's wrap things up with this. I was initially unimpressed by the Godzilla X Kong trailer. It just seemed weird. The action seemed kind of weird. How Godzilla running seemed really weird.
Right.
The pink scales. But all of a sudden, after the series, I'm much more interested in that movie now than when I just saw the trailer. Are you guys interested in Godzilla X Kong? Mac?
Yes, kind of reverting back to what I was saying before. I think this series, just going into it as cold as I have, is just kind of, again, piqued my interest in, and also talking to you guys about this stuff, right? Like, it's always good to like talk about people who know more about it than you do, because it kind of makes like, oh, I should go check that out. So I think there's certainly, you know, a couple of the new things, including what you just said, that I'm going to go kind of check out once I finish this first season and find out what the fuck happened to Tim.
Carlos.
Yeah, I didn't need another reason to go see Godzilla, but I always make it a habit to go see.
What if we told you he's going to be in the next WrestleMania?
I'd definitely be able to see how that happens, how they make a ring that's big enough for him to be contained.
We've all seen Robot Jocks, man. It can happen.
Yeah, isn't there like one movie where Godzilla gets on his tail and just starts riding his tail? Can we do that on the ring?
Oh, God.
He could fly
Yeah.
after he tucks his tail and uses his atomic breath. Somehow he could fly like that.
Yeah.
I did not like when they did that. I thought it was silly, but
Yeah.
I don't know. But then again, I love Jet Jaguar also, who's completely silly.
Yeah.
Paul, Godzilla X Kong. I know you did not like the trailer.
No, I did not, and I'm actually less interested in it now because of Monarch. Because Monarch has set the bar so high, and that movie just looks worse than any of the other movies. And I'm like, I'll watch it when it's like on HBO or HBO Max or whatever the hell streaming service it's on. You know, I'll wait for that, but I'm not paying $20 plus. No,
I'll send you the $20, Paul.
I don't want your $20, Carlos. You need to save that money to pay off your wife's therapy after she watches 40 episodes of WrestleMania. You're gonna have to buy her something nice so she doesn't make you watch 40 episodes of Grey's and Revenge. But yeah, no, it gave me less much worse for it. You know, I mean, Barbie Godzilla, and he's running on the beach like it's Baywatch. I mean, like, how do you go from, you know what I mean? It's like when people saw Sonic the first time, like everybody was like, "What the hell did you do? He looks weird and terrible." And then they, and granted they fixed it, but So.
I can appreciate your perspective. I mean, I'm still gonna go into it with pretty low expectations just because the other movies didn't impress me as much. Is that a Shania Twain song? Don't impress me much. But
yeah, it is.
God damn it!
That's also written about Godzilla.
Yes. Oh, I forgot one question. That is my bad. Let's address this one quickly.
I want to see where this goes.
No, Paul, and you're going to answer this first.
Okay.
Why do American studios often fail at Godzilla?
Okay.
He's got like a written out answer to this.
Okay. First of all, the Matthew Broderick one failed because it wasn't Godzilla.
Yeah,
that monster was not Godzilla. Now, if they had made that movie and never said it was Godzilla, you'd have an okay movie about a giant monster attacking New York City.
Like Cloverfield?
Like Clover. I was literally just gonna go.
No,
Clover.
not kind of like Cloverfield. The other problem that they get into, and this is a problem that Cloverfield had, this is a problem that the Matthew Broderick Godzilla movie had, some of the other ones did, and this is what I said in the beginning about that I was worried with this TV show, is they spend too much time talking about the humans and developing the humans and telling the human story, but not a human story as it relates to Godzilla. And one of the things that was my fear going into Monarch, and one of the reasons that I liked it is because all of the human story relates to Godzilla and the other monsters. Like, it could have very easily gone off on a tangent about the fact that the guy has the two families and the sister and the brother meet for the first time and all that. Like, they could have padded that out for another 2 more episodes, and I'm sure that somebody probably suggested that they did. And I'm glad they pulled back on that, because that's where these movies always go terribly wrong. I don't give a crap about you and your relationship when there's a giant lizard stepping on people 4 blocks away.
Yeah.
If there's a giant lizard walking around Los Angeles, I'm not going to go and profess my love to my neighbor or whoever. I'm getting the hell out of there, because that's the bit. You know what I mean? Like, it would be like if somebody made a movie about COVID, about people falling in love and this. It's like, no, you got to talk about the monster in the room.
Mac, why do you think American studios get Godzilla wrong most of the time?
I don't know enough to answer this question succinctly beyond what I'm just going to say is an educated guess of maybe not having as much of a firm understanding of like the kind of core material, right? I feel like Hollywood is always so kind of out of ideas at this point that they over kind of execute on, like, kind of to Paul saying, like the wrong pieces of the story a lot of the time. And I think, part of that is the cast that goes with, each of those movies, right? Like, I think even if I just go back and go, oh, like that Godzilla movie that I keep referencing is the Matthew Broderick one. I don't know that. I don't know that because it was a great story. I know that because Matthew Broderick was in it, right?
Right.
Where I think like the actors and actresses that are in Monarch, like, they do a good job of just, again, filling the story that fills the bigger narrative, which is it's Godzilla. It's Godzilla's story. It's not a person's story. It's not their story around Godzilla. This is more of a Godzilla story and each of their piece of the puzzle in it. So that would be my answers. I think like the Hollywood studios, the bigger Hollywood, like kind of miss the mark on doing that. And they go for more of like hey, if we get this person, this is going to, it just seemed like this was more kind of like well written, well executed, well acted. And I think that's what makes this one different from like, the previous Hollywood iterations that we've seen.
That's actually pretty much on the mark. I completely agree with that. I mean, for the movies, they've certainly had talented actors. I mean, they had Quicksilver and Scarlet Witch, Ken Watanabe, Tywin Lannister. Who else they got?
Bryan Cranston.
Bryan Cranston, Brian Tyree Henry.
Vera Farmiga?
Yeah. So I do think it's the core problem with most of those movies is the writing. So yeah,
it's the mix, right? It's the balance of like, I think all of those, and I don't know what the right mix is, but it seems like all of those should be like 70-30 or 80-20, 70-30 in favor of following the main narrative and like a little tidbits here and there about the characters that keep you interested, but not going so far into each character that you start to lose the bigger picture.
Unless it's for Tywin Lannister, he can have the whole movie. I mean, that guy's awesome. And Carlos, let's end this one with you. Why do American studios get Godzilla wrong?
I think Mac pretty much nailed it. It's the whole not understanding what the whole premise and why Toho decided to go out and make the whole Godzilla monster. Not understanding the whole premise about representing the whole nuclear experience, like experiencing the whole nuclear bomb being dropped on them and experiencing devastation. And us as Americans probably will never be able to understand that particular side of it. And directors or somebody, the writers, has to do a better job in trying to get that particular version of them. But if we're going to be doing it for mainly North American, United States audience, things like that, find something that's kind of similar that they could probably relate to, put it to characters over here.
I love how the guy that's seen the least Godzilla movies has made the best point about all of it. So,
but I watch a lot of TV. So it's that, it's like, I think all of us are such good critics just in our own right, because that's what we all do, right? We play games, we watch movies, watch TV shows like all the time. So I think it just helps give all of us a healthy understanding when you see something that like you either want to see more of and you know what it is, or you know what's wrong,
Yep.
Great point. And with that, let's bring this episode to a close. If you want to visit Paul, go to paulsemel.com, an excellent website full of reviews, previews,
and Godzilla.
And this guy, Mac, has a bunch of excellent products at Turtle Beach. Go to turtlebeach.com for excellent gaming headphones and other peripherals. And don't forget to visit Revisiting Mania on YouTube and Facebook for a retrospective review of the previous 40 WrestleManias, currently up to WrestleMania 20. And we'll be back next week as soon as I figure out what I want to talk about next. But do leave a comment. I really enjoyed having 4 people on. I thought it was a fun conversation. And we got a lot of cool different perspectives. If you guys would like to see more episodes like this, please leave a comment. Please like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time on RPadTV. Bye for now.
Bye.
Yo.